suppose might as well get cracking, I suppose, then, yeah. Okay, so, right, welcome all to, yes. Oh, there's a bit of an echo going on there. I might put people off. Thank you. Yes, so welcome all on this cold evening to the third meeting of our scrutiny panel on Regrow, Rewild and Recycle. Happy New Year to anyone I've not spoken to already. So we just get cracking on there. So we have got a number of apologies for lateness. Got two people who said they're on their way, but they're going to be coming late. So we've got that's Councillor Taylor and Councillor Crawford. We've also got apologies from our co-opted member, Paul Carter. So we just move on there, and we haven't got any substitutions this evening. We haven't got any urgent matters. We haven't got any matters to be considered in private, as far as I'm aware. And I don't know if anyone wants to declare any declarations of interest. No, that looks all fine to me. So in that case, we'll have a look at the minutes of the meeting. We just see if there's any issues with page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11. Does not, there's any problems there. So in that case, hopefully members will have noted the 3 recommendations that we put together after the discussion at the last meeting. So that's there for everyone to see. I could bring up matters arising from the minutes that after the meeting, we did talk about beavers and the introduction of beavers. So what did actually happen is that a resident got in touch with me asking questions about whether we've got sufficient water flow in order to reintroduce beavers, and also looking at how we're going to be managing the reintroduction in terms of staff from the council side. So I did actually ask questions about it. I spoke to Dr. Sean McCormack from Healing Wildlife Trust to find out what was going to be going on about that. And one thing he did do in the discussion, he did say that he would welcome myself, residents, and maybe others to go along and look at what's happening with the reintroduction in order to put any concerns at rest. So if I do get the opportunity to go and visit at some stage, I also will invite other people. So, so we have got that as matters arising, and of course, on a lighter note, well, possibly lighter note, it was in the news that apparently the beavers have done an awful lot in Ukraine in order to prevent Russian soldiers from being able to move further forward. So, so I think there's every reason to believe that beavers have got plenty to offer reading. So we've got that conclusion from the meeting. So that's good. So, okay, so in that case, we might as well move on to we've got.
Chair.
Oh yes, Councillor Saylor. Oh, I can't hear you at the moment. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay, apologies. Sorry, I didn't know if you were on screen or not because I was just getting a blank screen. I know you did give my apologies for lateness. Sorry, I've actually abandoned the bus now, so I've got to come back home to do this online. So I did prefer to be in person, but unfortunately, I don't know what's going on with the traffic on the Uxbridge Road tonight. Councillor Crawford may have the same issue. It's a bit further down up the road from me.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for making the effort anyway in the cold weather to try and get here. Yes, it's good to see you. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So in that case, we might as well get cracking. We've got our speakers here this evening. The way we're going to run this is that I think it's probably best if we listen to all our speakers first and then move in with questions afterwards, because I think that might be the tidiest way of looking at it, because we don't want to just keep repeating over the same ground again. Yes, so, there's just other people just coming in there. Right, so, yes, so in that case, I'll, first of all, I think if I can ask Dale Mortimer, our Tree Services Manager, to speak to us about the subject we're here for tonight, for trees. Thank you.
Is that microphone on? Is that working? Okay. I'll just share the screen. So, Growing Ealing's urban forest. Our current vision: to ensure that trees remain a defining feature of the borough, the council is committed to increasing canopy cover from 16.9% to 25%, attaining a 35% increase on the existing canopy cover by 2030. The London Borough of Ealing is one of the greenest boroughs in London, containing a vast collection of street trees, housing trees, many parks and open spaces, all of which contribute to Ealing's urban forest. The council's 2018 iTree project accurately measured the full extent of urban forest and highlighted the great many ecosystem benefits that the forest provides. Here are some of the volunteers conducting the survey back in 2018. And here's a nice image of all the benefits that the forest currently provides. Not least, the interception of 48 Olympic swimming pools of water. That was my my daughter at the time. Well, she still is my daughter. But she, yeah, she was annoyed that I'd spent so long on the project. So I said I'd include her in all my future presentations. She'd be mortified now, I think. The council is rightly proud of this vast forest, which also offers environmental, economic and social benefits, many of them yet unmeasurable. Ealing's trees greatly enhance the quality of life for people living in the borough, and the need for trees has probably never been greater. Climate change. The potential effects of climate change are now widely recognised as being a significant threat for humanity and the ecological systems we rely on. Ealing Council declared a climate emergency in April 2019 and formally adopted the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy. Within the strategy, the impact and role of nature is considered under one of 4 themes, and it identifies 3 nature objectives. Increase canopy cover across Ealing by 2030, manage green spaces to increase biodiversity, increase natural carbon capture and reduce carbon emissions, and utilise green infrastructure to capture carbon, mitigate surface water flooding, and improve biodiversity and water quality. Growing and sustaining Ealing's urban forest is obviously paramount to achieving these nature objectives. This includes not just preserving and protecting the existing trees, but planting new trees and woodlands. Aligned with the London target, the council is committed to increasing canopy cover to 25% by 2030. That's achieving a 35% increase in the existing canopy cover. And working towards that target, the council has, I suppose, recently pledged to plant 50,000 new trees by 2025. So canopy cover. Canopy cover is the area of land covered by trees when viewed from above. The Ealing iTree Canopy Survey used aerial photography at random points to conduct a land cover assessment. Each point was classified as either being a tree or housing or road or water. And across each ward, we did between 500 and 700 points. So it was a very accurate survey. The results are shown here. I'm not sure if you'll be able to read any of that. North Greenford, just to call out a few. So North Greenford is the highest with nearly 26% canopy cover. Whilst at the other end of the scale, Southall Green has only 6.4% canopy cover. The canopy assessment highlights the disparities in the extent of tree cover between wards, but the environmental and sociological reasons for this variation are a bit more complex. So Ealing's urban forest. As I've already mentioned, Ealing already has a vast urban forest, extensive woodlands, spectacular parkland, and widespread garden planting. along with the street trees. All of this contributes to approximately 2,344,000 trees borough-wide. Awarded the status of Tree City of the World in 2019, Ealing Council has been recognised professionally for its responsible and innovative arboricultural management. In the past 10 years, the council has increased its street tree stock by an estimated 8% and created more woodlands. Growing the urban forests by a further 35% is an ambitious target that will require careful planning to ensure that the local impact of tree planting is always positive and that existing land uses are not compromised. Locating trees. Right tree in the right place. When planting new trees, it's important to select the right species and location, as this will affect not only the establishment of the tree, but also the long-term impact on local environment and the future management. The council recognises the principle of right place, right tree, and the importance of considering the context within which a tree is to be planted, together with understanding the future design issues likely to impact upon the tree over its lifetime. So the right tree. It's important to get the species. First of all, you want to understand what trees are in the street already, how well those trees are establishing. Look for. We try to introduce species diversity within the street. So if there's a monoculture down there, we would introduce some variety perhaps. And then we've got to obviously consider the availability of space, make sure that the tree, its final height and spread are going to fit within the location it's proposed. And then the right place. So what's the existing space used for? Will trees in that space be positive? Will it have a positive outcome? We have to consider other habitats, other nature considerations. We don't want to shade out important grassland or affect water sources or ponds. And obviously the tree has to fit within its surroundings. Tree establishment methods. The most appropriate tree establishment method varies depending on the site factors, the growing challenges and opportunities, and the budget. Planting very young trees in large groups is the most cost-effective route to establishing canopy cover. However, this is not always compatible with site conditions and existing site usage. In the urban environment, site conditions are often not hospitable for very small trees, and larger, stronger specimens are needed. These also have the advantage of providing significant and instant impact. Very young trees can be purchased for £1, but at the other end of the scale, trees of sort of 10 meters in height will cost more like 5,000. So whip planting, this is the more cost-effective end of the scale. Generally used for copses and woodlands within existing parkland and grassland. Whips are approximately 18 months old, around about 50 centimeters in height. They're easily handled, often planted in large groups of sort of 30 or more, and typically planted approximately 1.5 meter spacing, amounting to about 4,500 trees per hectare. We heavily mulch them, and generally they don't require watering. Specimen park trees. These are slightly larger, young trees known as light standards, with a stem circumference, this is a nursery measurement of stem circumference, being 6 to 8 centimeters and a height of approximately 2 meters. light standards are significantly more established than whips, whilst still being relatively easy to handle and plant. Light standards can be planted as open grown trees individually or in groups with a spacing of about 6 meters. We double stake them to ties and fix them to ties with tree ties. They're heavily mulched and, depending on the weather, require a 2-year watering program. Although with recent summers, we've increased that to sort of 3 years now. Here's some examples of those. Street trees. New street trees will be standards or select standards. These are 8 to 10 or 10 to 12 centimeters respectively. Some sort of 2.5 to 3 meters in height. Street trees go into probably one of the harshest environments in the urban environment anyway. Heavily compacted ground surrounded by impermeable surfaces, reflected structures, and pedestrian and vehicle traffic. The average street tree faces quite a lot of challenges. Standard sized trees are widely planted essentially because they're large enough to have an immediate presence and they have reserves to assist their establishment. But they're still relatively easy to move and they can be planted without substantial cost. So the 50,000 new trees, over the next 4 years, we're going to be planting trees using those 3 methods. Approximately 30,000 whips, about 10,000 light standards, that's the 6 to 8 size, and then 10,000 regular standards, the larger ones for the streets. The program and list is provided here. I won't go through those, perhaps only to highlight that we're looking to do the bulk of the planting through 23, 24, and be hopefully well on our way by 25. Stakeholders and partners. The tree service, the council's tree service, we're the custodians of the borough's urban forest. The team are responsible for the management, maintenance of all public owned trees and provide professional arboricultural advice to all council departments. And we respond to tree related inquiries from residents, councillors and other stakeholders. The tree service will be responsible for delivering this programme, Growing Ealing's Urban Forest. And we've recently recruited a new tree planting officer whose job it will be to plan, coordinate and deliver not just the planting of these 50,000 trees, but also a kind of wider expansion of the urban forest through private land, residents' gardens, and encouraging more trees everywhere, essentially. The Parks and Rangers service will be integral in planning, investigating and locating the new trees, copses and woodlands on parks land. Their extensive knowledge of the local sites, habitats and park users will be employed to ensure that the new trees not only add to the aesthetics of the landscape, but also offer significant positive outcome for the local community. Stakeholders continued. Ealing Tree Wardens, I'm pleased finally to say that we're going to be relaunching in 2023 the Ealing Tree Wardens. And we seek to engage a team of local volunteers to help maintain new trees, promote the benefits of trees, and encourage residents to plant trees in their gardens. The wardens will be offered annual training by the tree service and will be encouraged to attend tree planting days and young tree maintenance events. Trees for Streets. Launching in November 22, the tree service signed up to the National Trees for Streets project. And I believe Simeon is on the call. I don't know if he would like to interject here, just to talk briefly about Trees for Streets and what that does.
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me on this meeting. Yeah, so Trees for Streets is, as you say, it's the National Street Tree Sponsorship Scheme. It sits within the charity Trees for Cities. So, and obviously, Tree Cities do a number of projects with Ealing Council. But the scheme basically provides councils with an easy mechanism to run a sponsorship scheme for trees in streets and trees in parks. In regards to trees in streets, a resident in one of our participating boroughs in Ealing can go online, select a spot on the street where they'd like their tree. They answer some questions to determine whether that location is suitable for planting, and their information then is fired over to the council, who survey the request to sponsor a tree in that location, and if it can go ahead, it gets planted in the planting season. We're in the middle of the planting season right now. So that's how we do in the streets, and then in parks, this was basically we do a similar scheme which we call celebration trees, and actually this scheme came about to a large part down to Dale, who was involved in helping us design the Trees for Streets scheme before we actually launched. So one of the things that he asked for was if he's going to put his street tree sponsorship scheme onto our platform, that he could also put his memorial and dedication scheme also onto the platform. A resident would go, and once again they pick a part where they want their tree for their dedication planted, and we do all the admin and collect all the payments and fire that over at the council. The slight change that we made with the scheme is that it supports dedication and memorial planting, but also planting for other reasons. We're finding people will plant a tree when they've had a significant event like birth of a children or a wedding, so forth. So the scheme offers I think offers fantastic ways for residents to engage with trees, with the environment, and with improving their immediate neighborhood, which is really very uplifting. We've seen in other areas where we've worked that we get a whole streets coming together to green up their whole street. We've got a very successful scheme running in Haringey where many streets there come together and even crowdfund to raise money for planting. They're so keen to green up their living spaces that they get involved in that regard. Also through the scheme, we often have access to additional funds. So this year, Mayor for London approached us, and the environment team at the GLA is putting funding into the participating councils in London for funding towards 110 extra trees per area. And those trees, any trees we get that aren't sponsored by an individual who says, I want it in my street, outside my house, or wherever they're determining it, all the extra monies we raise through sort of grants and corporate monies go into priority streets, and those priority streets are streets that have low canopy, have high deprivation or low affluence. They're streets with state schools in them, and the other location we like as a priority is sort of planting around playgrounds. So Dale has got the opportunity with that to put some extra trees in to those spots. So what we hope with the scheme is that we so in summary, we generate a lot more engagement around trees. I think it's great that people can get involved and green up where they live and take an active role in that. And we found in, with relationships, with the Haringey is a good example, where we're actually now quite a reasonable chunk of their overall tree planting comes through the scheme. So that particular scheme, we've over 2 seasons there, our requests for about 430 trees have come in. It can really add. We basically saw sponsorship as another funding source for trees on top of all the rest of the stuff that you do, your direct funding, your grant funding, your Section 106 and SIL funding. So we really wanted to take sponsorship onto another level. So that, I suppose that's it in summary. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much, Simeon. So what we'll do, we'll have a few more speakers before we go into questions. So I'm sure we'll have plenty to ask when we get to it. I mean, this might be a good opportunity for me to segue into the next speaker by talking about the fact that on Sunday, a number of us went on a site visit, and we went to Regrow Farm and we went to see what was going on there. And it was just really fascinating to hear about the history of the site and how it'd been used for hay farming. But now I'm a group of people who have come through Lagercan, who do the amazing litter picking work in Ealing. So they've become friends of Regrow Farm and they're looking after the place. And we discussed the trees that are there and maybe the different challenges in terms of the diseases that have affected trees, but at the same time, where they've had people who are there drinking and how they've had to make a lot of effort into clearing rubbish that's there as well. And the other kind of challenges there, that there have been waters coming down where they don't want it to be, so they've actually had to behave like beavers and put damming in place in order to control what's happening with the waters. And it was just overall just really kind of a fascinating discussion. But one thing that really did come up that was quite important was that there's a lot of development along there. So, and it's quite an interesting balance, because they're talking about, in planning, we talk about overshadowing, in terms of overshadowing maybe people's gardens or people's homes, but they're talking about the fact that very tall buildings might overshadow trees. So there are different things that we need to maybe talk about and consider. So one thing they wanted to look at was, is it possible for us to have an ecology officer to advise us on such issues? These are things that we might want to discuss later when we look at recommendations. But overall, it was just, it just was an incredibly helpful visit, and just to really actually get some understanding about trees in their proper environment. And it did feel like we were in a little section of countryside there. So that was really lovely to do. What we were planning to do afterwards was to go on to North Mandeville in my ward, where there's been a lot of volunteering to plant trees, and get to understand a bit about that. It didn't really happen in the end. It was a very cold day and we didn't actually have an expert officer with us to talk us through and what's happening there. So we decided not to do that part. However, it wasn't a complete dropout, because a few months ago I did actually go to my ward when Trees for Cities were down, helping local people plant trees. And so I did get an understanding of what was going on. I got together with the family and I did understand the work that's going on and how the trees were planted, and just really get a flavour for how fantastic it is that the organisation is helping people to get involved. Because the family, they lived in a flat, and it was something that the mum and dad, 2 little boys, and they were just desperate to get their 2 little boys out there doing some kind of work with gardening, with trees, and they had the opportunity. So they were just really pleased about that. So I can report that it was very successful. I mean, there has been a previous time Trees for Cities came to my ward. So there's 1 tree out there that myself and my 2 ward colleagues have planted. But now there's another tree that I was involved with. So I'm just really proud of having that opportunity. So in that case, Seegersins, who's wanting to thank Trees for Cities. So please can I welcome Susanna Littlewood, who's going to tell us more about what the amazing work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you for that very nice introduction. It's really nice to hear about your experience with us planting a tree and that it was so positive. So Trees for Cities has had a really long ongoing partnership with Ealing Council, actually for more than a decade. And I was just looking through our records recently, and I think we've planted nearly 90,000 trees with Ealing Council since 2010, which is amazing, and hoping that we'll be able to help plant these 50,000 more as part of the new plan. And I think we've done potentially more than 30 projects over that time as well. And that's been a mixture of planting in parks. We've done woodland creation, but also projects with schools, such as our edible playground projects, where we do greening of playgrounds with a particular focus on growing fruit and veg with the kids as well. And we've done, so we've done a lot of planting. And then more recently, we've been really leaning into that community engagement side of things, just realizing that that really is kind of Trees for Cities' real strength, is getting the community involved, and seeing how important that is. And last year, at the end of May, we had the Ealing Tree Festival. That was the first Ealing Tree Festival, which was a whole community engagement day to try and get residents more interested in trees and learning more about why urban trees are so important. And we're hoping that we'll be able to build on that and really draw on that community engagement side of things as we go forward. Alongside the planting, I guess maintenance of trees is also becoming sort of forefront of things, as with the summer heat waves that Dale was mentioning. It's really important to both be planting more trees, but also looking after all of the ones that we've got. We're doing work with, I think, various different parts of the council, and we have done over the years. So we've worked with the tree service team, with parks, with schools, but also we've had contact with the regeneration team. And I think that's also a real strength, that we've got those connections with different parts of the council. And I think there's even more opportunity to link those things up as we go forward. So when we first started working with Ealing, it was kind of on a year-on-year basis. We'd find a project and do it that year, and then the next year we think, oh well, is there anything that we can do again next year? But in 2016 we signed a strategic partnership that was for 3 years, and that's really enabled us to make the most of the partnership. And we renewed that strategic partnership for another 3 years, from 2019 to 2022, and we've just re-signed as well another strategic partnership from 2022 to 2025. And we really hope that that partnership will be able to support this new planting plan of 50,000 trees. And just having that a sort of slightly longer term vision is really helpful for us in terms of planning projects and getting the match funding that can enable these projects to go ahead, with all of the community engagement aspect that goes into it. I guess that's, a summary for now. But happy to answer any questions at the end too.
Oh, thank you so much, Susanna. And so actually you got the privilege of having a local resident come to speak to us this evening to get a perspective on what's going on from the residents' point of view as well. So please now welcome Dr. Martin Kunz to speak to us. Thank you.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I also want in particular to thank the council for increasing the number of trees in what I call my road, which is Mill Hill Road in Acton, where we've been living for 22 years, and it has significantly changed its appearance thanks to trees in the city. I'm also going to speak only about street trees. So if you look at if you remember the division of 50,000 down to 10,000, my experience is mostly with the street trees, although I have also been involved and started planting an orchard in Heathfield Gardens probably 15 years ago, which has not thrived because there is no water and the soil is so awful that it's basically been useless what we did, even though it helped the council to get a green flag up there, which in my opinion is rather useless. So the local perspective is Mill Hill Road and the Mill Hill Residents Association. I have provided a written submission where I mention some specific instances for which I don't know whether we have time here. I want to focus rather on a few general points to make the best use of the time that's been given to me. It is my impression that probably in the hurry to meet targets tree planting contractors or tree planting crews, whoever does it, commit a couple of mistakes. And I'm not a professional horticulturist or tree person. I have seen just around my area trees planted in totally unsuitable locations. For example, planting under existing canopies. When there is a tree from a garden or from a park overhanging the pavement and then putting a tree underneath there, that tree will struggle because there is a limit of light. I can understand if you're a hurried crew, you rush along and you don't even look up, but it should be one of the basics. Or the corner of the entrance between Mill Hill Road and Gunnersbury Lane has been remodeled to slow down traffic. And footnote there, that hasn't worked. It's still a racetrack as soon as they come around the corner. But there were trees planted there on the north side where the old Acton, the pub was, the Mill Hill pub. That if the tree had been planted a meter further inside, it would probably still be there, but it was planted too close to the curb. So the big lorries, construction traffic going to the Acton town, to the college, they just mowed it over because they couldn't turn the corner. So location is haphazard. There's also the issue of too narrow pavements, and I know that actually is one of the residents who lobbied for trees to be planted in Gunnersbury Lane between Mill Hill Road and Avenue Road, where there should never have been any trees planted because the pavement is only 1.20 meters wide, and they've taken away 25% of that space. Failure, more important, is failure of protection and lack of aftercare. We have at the end of Mill Hill Road, Acton High School, and trees near a school, in my opinion, need special protection. So the first rule should be plant only very strong species. Turkish hazel seems to be one that people with too much testosterone have trouble breaking.
Oh, is it? I think, can we just try and wind up? Because I think we're at 3 minutes.
Okay. My main point is the watering issue, particularly street trees. Because they have practically no area around them, and unless they're regularly watered, it's basically a waste of money and time. Would it make sense to pay bonus to a contractor if trees are still alive after 2 years, perhaps? Because I wonder, out of those 10,000 that you plan to plant, and speech trees, I know the most difficult ones, how many will still be there at the end? I also have a special point about the complaints procedure on the Ealing website. In Gunnersbury Lane, there was a new pet shop, and in front of the pet shop was a tree which was fairly nicely established despite the drought. It was cut down. The trunk still shows that it was a reasonable tree. I tried to complain to the council. The website gives you easy opportunity to complain about trees being in the way of whatever, but it doesn't give you a chance to complain about people doing damage to trees. Eventually, I got a response after weeks, which said, your complaint has been dealt with. Didn't tell me any content.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Evans. That's very fantastic, thank you. Right, so in that case, I'd like to open up to members of the panel, please, to speak, to ask questions, and also if you have any comments on the site visit, that'd be very much welcome as well, please. Thank you. So as Councillor Mohan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions and I'll try to be brief. First of all, I also feel that in general, the number of trees we have planted, it's really praiseworthy. And I'm very happy that on my road, like Dr. Cousins, it looks really very beautiful, and the surrounding roads. So congratulations in terms of planting trees. But I quite agree with the Dr. Cousins on a few issues, particularly aftercare work, which I think needs improvement. Some trees kind of bend, and they are bending and they are not checked, corrected. And trees which are vandalized, it takes quite a while to replace them. And as it happened, we can blame the weather. This year, quite a number of trees have died because of the bad weather. I don't know, was it due to lack of watering system? These are a few points I've seen. And also in terms of the base of the trees, where the trees planted, there is a lot of variation in the area surrounding the base, and also how it's left, like tarmac or soil, square, round. I really can't understand the system that that how it's done. Some trees are completely surrounded by concrete, and there is no soil area left for watering, for the water to go in. I have a few suggestions to make. I have made this point before, that there are a number of people who would like to plant trees in the memory of their near dears, but the price of the trees, a tree is really high, for something like 700 to 800. So if we can think of some scheme, if we can subsidize it, I think that people will be more willing to, more people will come forward to plant trees, and the number of trees in total will increase. Similarly, I think there would be people who are willing to plant trees in their front garden and rear garden. So there should be some encouragement for people to plant trees in their own garden, if we can think of some scheme. So these are some of the points and finally, I'm interested in finding out, do we have our own nursery, or do we buy trees, sort of baby trees from outside? And what is the system in terms of tendering, etc.? Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Mohan. So we'll just open up to the panel who can answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, nice long list of questions there.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah.
Right, where shall I begin with yours then? So aftercare work needs improvement. Yeah, I can understand where some of that's coming from. Trees bend and are not corrected. We survey the street trees every 3 years. So they're planted, depending on when they're planted, within the cycle of 3 years, depends on how quickly they're going to get checked. So maybe we do need to think about checking new trees as a sort of follow-up check, maybe 2 years after they've gone in, rather than waiting for them. Currently, we wait for them to come up on the cycle. So we would plant them, and then they will get surveyed as part of the routine inspection regime. So it may be that, yeah, it may be the case that they go in, and it could be 3 years, I suppose, before they're looked at. And then if they have been vandalised, that wouldn't get picked up until that 3 years. All that comes down to availability of staff, time, and budgets. Yeah. Now that is going to improve with this new planting officer. So hopefully we will get, once he's in place, maybe we'll make it his job that we check the new planting maybe annually for the first 3 years until they're kind of established and on the growing in a way. The loss is due to hot weather. So I think we lost. I mean, we obviously haven't surveyed all of the trees that we planted last year. There was 1,500, incidentally. So it's quite a lot of trees. So although you might drive around and think you see quite a few dead ones, you don't see 1,500 dead ones by any means. The losses were generally more in parkland sites, so on grass sites. I don't know whether that's because residents are watering the street trees, or whether there's just less competition in the street. Although the street environment is horrible for a new tree, there isn't anything else really competing for the water that's there. So if the water table is fairly high, then it may be that they pull water up from lower down. But certainly our greater losses have been in park sites. So this summer, we increased the watering, as you suggested, from sort of 2 years to 3 years. So we were watering trees in park sites that we planted 2 years ago. And we can't really increase it much beyond that. The other thing that we do need to do, and this might be a job that we can get the tree wardens involved in, is remulching. Ideally, we would remulch all the grass sites every year, but that's not a cheap exercise. And maybe if the tree wardens or perhaps Friends-of groups could be used to remulch trees within parks. So that might be something to explore. The tree pit treatment. So tree pits on residential streets, we essentially, the planting contractors will create a hole, a square hole, is 600 by 600, so 600 millimeters by 600, and they plant the tree into that. It could be larger. We have discussed with the contractors making this pit slightly longer, slightly wider, not so narrow. That's something we can look at. The ones you're talking about where there's been tarmacked up to the stem, that's probably where there's been highway alterations and the contractors have tarmacked beyond what they're supposed to do for the tree pit. So generally, tree pits there should be quite a substantial gap of soil between the tree and the paving or the tarmac. I mean, there are a lot of trees. We've got 28,000 street trees. So although we look at them every 3 years, we don't always spot these kind of problems. And it's not, even when we do, it's not that easy to resolve en masse. The memorial trees, they are expensive, but half of the cost is the plaque, the tree plaque. The plaque costs, I think, £450, and it's a very nice plaque.
That's because the council, they're getting it from the council. Maybe they could do it privately.
Well, you could have a tree without a plaque. So you can, if we plant the tree for you and it's in memory of someone, I mean, you don't need a plaque to know it's your tree, do you? You know it's your tree and it's there and you can go and see it whenever you want. So you can buy, through the scheme, you can buy a tree, or you can buy a tree and a plaque. So
does it cover the aftercare? Sorry. Does the cost of the tree include the aftercare for memorial trees?
Yeah, I hope so.
So yes.
So yes.
It does. Yeah, so the cost includes the purchasing the tree, planting the tree, and then maintaining the tree for 3 years. And if the tree was to fail in those 3 years, then we would plant another one and maintain another one for 3 years. So it is quite expensive, but it's not a particularly easy task.
Sorry, but it sounds like half the cost of the plaque.
Yeah. So if you want the plaque, then the plaque costs £450, because that's pretty much the cost of the plaque is to make and get delivered to the council. So yeah, we can't really move on the cost of the plaque. The plaques are being used for decades. They're kind of the plaque we use. They're made of cast aluminium alloy. They last a long time. I think anything else, I've seen them on wooden stakes in other boroughs and they rot off and disappear. So I think it's a choice. You either have a plaque or you don't, essentially. Residents willing to plant trees in their front gardens. We are looking at how we can promote that and how we can make that maybe subsidised by the council, perhaps, but certainly how we can advise people to plant the right trees, and how we can help them do it. So that will be coming. That will hopefully come perhaps with the tree wardens and with the new planting officer. And our own nursery. Yeah, it's a nice idea. It costs quite a lot of money to grow trees, and land is not, there's not tons of land around here for growing trees on. The nurseries that grow trees have been doing it for decades. They've got well-established systems. They've got huge water supply, and they're just geared up for it, really. They can produce them far cheaper than we ever could. So it's far, far, far cheaper to just buy them in. And we've got quite a lot of good suppliers now. So I don't think we need our own nursery at this stage, I'm afraid.
Thank you. So next in line, I've got Councillor. Okay. Very polite of you, Councillor. So Councillor Consey, please, followed by Councillor Crawford and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about, so obviously there's 50,000 new trees that you're planting. How far does that take the council towards the 25% canopy cover? And essentially the question I'm asking is how many trees you need to plant to get to that 25% of canopy cover? And then obviously you were talking about at the start about sort of the variation in wards in terms of the amount of canopy cover there is. And obviously Southall Green, I think you mentioned, had the lowest. I have to say all of the sites, that were listed on the slide in terms of proposed venues for the sort of the mass planting, I would say not all of them I know exactly where they are, but is there a tendency to aim those in the wards where there's the lowest canopy cover? And also in terms of the planting of the street trees, again, would that be aimed at those particular locations? And then my final question is, when trees are removed for like health reasons, etc., or disease, and they're removed, how quickly does the council then go to replace a new tree back where one has been removed? Is it within weeks or months, or do you have to wait a certain period of time before you can do that? Yeah, they were my questions.
Might as well answer those questions. There's quite a few of them before we move to the next councillors, please. Thank you.
Right, some quite challenging questions there. The first one then, so 50,000 trees, how many do we need to plant to get to 25%? Well, essentially, we need to plant 25%, so we've got to increase it by 35%. So we're looking at planting 35% of our overall forest, which is 234,000. So we need to plant lots of trees to get to 25% by 2030. Not only do we need to plant trees on council land, but we need the public and private landowners to plant lots of trees. Because increasing canopy cover by 35% is a lot of canopy. And we can't do that on council land alone. So we will plant where we can, almost as much as we can to some degree. We'll plant where it's appropriate as much as we can do. And after that, we will have to look at residents and private landowners to try and get the rest of it up. But it's a big challenge. And in terms of aiming it, obviously we aim it at the low canopy areas. Southall Green has been a challenge. I mean, we've planted, I would probably say about 400 or 500 street trees in that area in recent years. They won't have all survived. There's quite a lot of pressures from parking, residents, vandalism. It's got, there's unique challenges there, which is probably why, it is 6.4. But we'll keep trying. And also another area I didn't mention, but Park Royal. So the Park Royal Industrial Estate is a huge area of the borough that is got very low canopy cover. So that's another area we need to look at, and that's predominantly private land. So we need to look at how we do that. And how quickly do we replace? Almost straight away. So we're removing trees. I think we removed a tree today that is proposed to be replanted next month. The planting season runs October to sort of February, March. So depending on when we've removed it, we'll replant the next planting season. And if we haven't, then let us know. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Crawford, please.
The middle, that's it, okay. Dale, it's nice to see you. And thank you for the work you've done at East Acton and you're doing at the moment. I met Mr. Clues on my walkabout, monitoring the streets, and there he was, and it was really quite impressive because I saw this guy measuring the trees. I mean, yeah, they really measured the trees. What a fabulous man. He used to work for Ealing, hadn't he? So it was really exciting. That I'm interested because being at East Acton, you just touched on Park Coyle, and I know you are really stretched with staff, but my interest is very much the engagement you have, or if you have the time to work with planners. I see in planning applications that the arboricultural, department will write something. But I have seen in East Acton a paucity, of real, of evergreens, of green. For example, leading to Park Coyle, the trees are there, but it's barren during the winter. And we're doing some really, nice things with our new square, but it looks so barren. And I would like, so the question is, so one is about what engagement you have with planners, because part of that also is in that area, in Victoria Road, we've got Imperial College, and they were planting fairly small trees, but they didn't work because underneath is a basement, and they still haven't replanted. I don't know what they're going to do, but it is whether they are working with the council. Are they working with you? Are they working with the planners? I don't know, but it really concerns me that the planners don't actually realise that if you've got a basement underneath, there's got to be a certain depth for it to work. And with all the developments, I think how we look at the planting of trees, because you're obviously working, with the council and doing a brilliant job. I'm really proud of the work that the council have done, but I'm not so proud of what the developers are doing. And sometimes there's like Section 106 from developers, but because they build right to the curtilage of their footprint, there's no room for trees. So they're probably giving. So what people are seeing, residents are seeing, they're seeing these massive, developments which are not actually softened by trees. You might see one or two trees. And the other thing is that what is becoming very fashionable and looks great, but there's like these tree planters, big tree planters, but they don't work because the moment you get real, hot weather, that there isn't the main, they can't maintain it. So it's very much what we can do with the Section 106 stuff, which we need to have, be able to steer a bit more. But as I said at the start, you probably don't have the the staff to support that. I look forward to it, to what you say.
Thank you, Councillor.
So at the moment we are short-staffed. So at the moment there's two of us covering the borough, but there's two in.
Sorry, Councillor Crawford, could you turn
Oh,
your
of
mic
course
off?
I can.
Yeah, so there's at the moment we are fairly short-staffed. Tom is the officer who comments on planning applications. He's been in the post about 2 years now. His comments have improved over those 2 years. Initially, he was new to it, and before Tom, it was a bit of a struggle getting around all the planning applications and making comments. But I think moving forwards, we're getting better comments and we're getting better response from the planners when we ask for things, when we make agreements with developers. You're right, it does come down to time and resources, and it would be lovely to be able to go around all the development sites and check that they've done what they've said they were going to do and they followed it up. And certainly, like, we might do that once or twice, but really you need to be doing that after 5 years, because we all see development sites with dead trees on them. But that is, it takes a lot of time. Building right to the edge of the curtilage of the property. I think that is probably our single biggest challenge with development sites. Be careful what I say. It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. There's a lot. It's down to the land value, isn't it? If you build that extra 2 or 3 foot and you're building 7 stories high, there's an awful lot of value and an awful lot of pressure on doing that and building that right to the edge. And then the only place we've got to plant is the street, the pavement, and sometimes there's not even space there. So it is a challenge, and I think it'll be a few more years before developers actually allow some kind of edge planting or start stepping back away from the edge of what they can build.
That, because, sorry, can I just come? I think the answer is making sure that our planners, because there is training for planners. TfL do brilliant training for planners, you know, on trees and whatever. What's it called? Urban design. And it's, I think, I don't know what the situation is, but with the planning department, because they're short-staffed too. But there's there are a lot of young planners who will be really, highly motivated in making sure that that we're planting trees, and the developers are aware of that. To me, I mean, you're probably a bit, you can say something at the beginning with the consultation, but it's the planners. So it's linking in, and perhaps the one council working that we used to talk about. I don't know what's happening now, but it is, I think, if it's like that budding up, that working with the planners and making sure that every development a planner is perhaps talking to you, just even if it's an email, but I think if the planners are working with the developers at an early stage, the developers will probably set it back. And they say, look, we need these trees. We have to have these trees. It doesn't take much, but I think it's the planners. And the thing that I'm most ashamed of in my ward is almost the loss of the green corridor, not because it's been reduced to get for development, but because the planting is so bad. And I sent a lot of some information to Chris Bunting just out of interest, but if anyone walks down down the Western Avenue on the East Acton side, where all the new developments are, there's meant to be enhanced planting, and there's no evergreen planting, so it looks very barren. So anything you can do to get a bit more evergreens would be helpful, and working with planners. Sorry for going on. Yeah, so I won't speak again.
Is there a question to answer from that, or should we just move on to the next? Okay. I think Councillor Taylor's been sat there patiently, so maybe I'll bring him in, please. He's joining us remotely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, we're kind of staring into a black hole here online because we can't see anybody in the room, actually, unfortunately. It was, is the officer Dale? Is that who it is?
Yes, Councillor Taylor, yes.
Okay, all right, because we didn't know who, because we can't see him, we didn't know who that particular was. Dale, unfortunately, we've got another East Acton councillor here, so but I'll echo what Councillor Crawford's already said. I had a couple of things. Just one is understanding and terminology. To be honest, it might be helpful, certainly for me. I can't speak for other councillors in terms of, because people have mentioned, Councillor Crawford's just mentioned evergreen trees. I've heard London planes. I mean, to be honest, I don't know the different types of trees. It'd be quite useful for us to know that. I don't mean that you give me a list tonight, but I mean, to get an idea of different types there are. I think I know you gave a list earlier on of the numbers of trees that are being planted in different places, and I can't remember the numbers, 10,000 across the borough street trees, and where they might end up going would be quite useful maybe for all councillors to get an idea of numbers. Wanted to ask about space, and it's been sort of alluded to, and partly by Mr. Lunds as well. I think about what's the minimum space that need for a street tree, particularly, to be able to plant a tree before it takes up too much pavement space and becomes an obstruction, for example. That I'd like to know. There is something about the complaints process. We won't go into too much detail, but I've often had a couple of people who say that, and it may be down to staffing issues, the frustration of getting responses back to their issues, often because they've got a complaint because they've got streets affecting their property in one sense. But the other thing was thinking about the costs of the damage and the replacement and the maintenance. Is there like a cost benefit analysis done? I often think in terms of housing terms, I often say it's 200 grand to build a house, and then what the cost is over 30 years. And I just wonder if some of that work is done. I know some of it is not, you can't put a cost on it because in terms of the benefit, a figure on the benefits, because it's long term, but I just wondered if there was any criteria there.
Thank you.
I don't know if I explained it or not, but
we'll soon find out. We'll hear the answer from Mr. Mortimer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So the different types of trees, I could send you the list of all the trees in your ward. We've got them all on a database. We plant quite a wide variety every year. The officers specify some fairly unusual trees, and I do the ordering. So I sometimes look at them and I think, well, okay, that's what they've chosen. And I think that variety is essential really in dealing with potential future pests and diseases, because there are diseases that affect certain species, and if we only had that species, I mean, we don't know what's going to come into this country in the future, but there's new diseases arriving in the UK all the time, and if we only had one species, take London plane for instance, it's the most widely planted, well, it's certainly got the largest canopy cover across London plane, and there's a disease currently running rife through France, which if it gets to the UK could probably wipe out all of the London plains in London. Without being too dramatic, probably in about 10 to 15 years, which would be a massive loss. So we plant a wide variety of trees, essentially, and I'll happily send you the list. The 10,000...
It's not just a list, it might be pictures, so I recognise them.
Well, once you've got the list, you can Google them, and there's loads of pictures online. There's dozens and dozens. I'll send you a picture of the top 10 maybe. The 10,000 street trees are, I mean, they are going to go everywhere. So we don't have the 10,000 site list at the moment. Councillor Crawford mentioned our surveyor was out surveying trees. As he's surveying the trees and measuring the existing trees, he's also looking now for new sites to plant trees. So he will propose new sites following the criteria we've set out. I'll take your point that we don't always get it right. I've seen trees planted under private trees, and it really frustrates me. But you've got to bear in mind, we do plant 1,500 a year, and despite their best intentions, they do occasionally make mistakes. So when we do, and it's highlighted or I see them, we get them out. We reinstate the pavement and we put it right. When you've plotted 50 trees in a morning, and you've measured another 50, I guess you're allowed to make one or two mistakes. The minimum amount of space for a tree. So that's not really the space for the tree. It's the space we need to leave for people to use the pavement. Is this probably what you're getting at, and what our criteria is? I think the regulations state, highways are often complaining to me about it. I think it states there's got to be 90 centimetres is the minimum for a double buggy to pass down the pavement. So we will always try and, we certainly won't plant trees where we're going to impede that. The only exception to that we have made recently was a cul-de-sac where there was an alternative pavement. It was a very narrow pavement. There's two very narrow pavements, essentially. One has lamp columns, telephone communication boxes, the big green ones. So that side of the pavement is already not compliant, if you like, with the regulations of 0.9. So we had a request from residents to plant trees there. So we planted trees on the one side, leaving the other side for public use. Not all of our trees meet the requirements. I can think of quite a few large historic London plains. There's one just down the road here next to between Lammas Park and Walpole, where there's probably about a foot between of pavement that you can actually walk. But people that use that road use the other side of the road. I had a wide buggy for quite a while when my kids were younger, and you soon get to know your way, where to go and what you avoid. And I think generally residents work out the best way of getting around. Cost benefit analysis. I don't think I want to mention to go on that too much. Sheffield famously hit the headlines about 5 years ago when they did some cost benefit analysis work and came up with the idea that they would remove lots of their street trees because it was going to cost them too much to maintain the pavements. And that got appalling press. There were residents getting arrested. They were trying to remove the trees early morning with police guards and all sorts. It got way out of hand. Essentially, we remove trees when there's a good arboricultural reason for doing so. So if their ongoing maintenance is unreasonable and unfeasible, it's likely just to result in them getting disease and being injured themselves, like just declining anyway, then we would remove them and we would replant. But like you say, the benefits of trees are very hard to measure and to quantify. So, are there more questions?
I think does that answer everything, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, partly. I think just on the last, no, I take your point about the answer, which probably makes me think I'm going to Google Sheffield now. Do you take a view, as part of what Mr. Loons was alluding to in terms of plant a tree, it actually going to stand the test of time at a certain period of time, a number of years before it kind of keels over? I think he was kind of alluding to in his written submission. The other thing was really, I mentioned the complaints process, because I've had a couple of instances, and I don't often deal with your department, in fairness, Dale, is the frustration they feel they don't get a response back as well. But I can't take the complaint now. I have to do that offline, sort of thing. But maybe it's a staffing issue. I don't know. Often about subsidence. Prepared to put you on the spot now.
Okay. So tree life expectancy. The life expectancy of a street tree is kind of widely expected not to be more than about 60 to 80 years. Now we've got many that are older than that, but depending on the species, you know, sometimes we're lucky to get 60 years out of a street tree. There is an argument that certain species, you could plant them, grow them, potentially only ever minor prune them, and then just remove them. So not go down the cyclical pruning route. Just grow them as trees, and then once they've achieved their kind of climax size, then you remove them and plant a new one. And that's exactly what a forester would do in a forest. I mean, you wouldn't go around pruning all the branches off every 3 years. But we've got trees that we pollard regularly and we prune regularly, and then I think we've probably got trees that we should allow to grow to their full ability, and then maybe we remove them. The lack of response, yeah, I mean, that is entirely down to resources at the moment, I'm afraid. There's essentially the tree service is now a 5-man team at the moment. There's 2 of us. I've been covering the subsidence for a colleague who's been sick, long-term sick. I think I'm on top of it now, but if you want to send me it over, I'll have a look at it.
That's great. Right, that's lovely. Thank you. So if I can just bring in Councillor Mohan quickly. Just wanted to add another point.
Just a last one, I promise. There are some old trees which are really very grand and graceful. They look beautiful. Some of them shed something, probably mainly at night, and it falls on the vehicles. And people complain a lot about that. Obviously, we tell people that we can't get rid of these trees because they are so beautiful. In terms of planting new trees, are we taking into consideration this element that if we can avoid planting trees which shed some kind of stuff that kind of falls on vehicles? I know we want to cut the use of cars in the in the borough. So are we taking into consideration in that respect?
Cherry trees are beautiful. Is it cherry tree?
No, so the liquid, if you like, as you called it, is I don't know how to put this politely. It's essentially a byproduct of aphids. So it's aphid poo. So the aphids feed on the tree, and then that drifts down as a sort of sticky honeydew, which coats cars, and it's not very nice, is it? I totally understand the issue with that. It's a fairly frequent inquiry to the tree service, and the easiest and simplest solution, if you can't park anywhere else, or you choose not to park, if you have to park under that tree, is to put a cover on the car. Yeah. I don't think car covers are particularly expensive. That's what I would do. To be honest, in my street, it's the only space you're always guaranteed to get. and I make a point of I'll park there for a night, and then obviously try to move it the next day before it gets completely covered. But we do go for kind of aphid resistant species now. But like I said, we still plant a wide variety. So I'm sure the aphids will, once they run out of something, they'll probably take a taste of something else. But we do our best.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sisamos now, please.
Hi, Dale. Have you been given money to take care of all these new trees that we're going to get planted?
I've got a budget. Yeah, and I think, well, we haven't got the trees yet. So I think once we got the trees, I'd expect the budget to change. I mean, at this stage, we've probably got enough money to maintain the trees we've got. And as we get more trees, we're going to need more budget. I can't really say much more than that at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's no point in us planting all these trees if we can't maintain them and look after them.
Excuse me, can I come in at this point? This is Chris Bunting, Assistant Director for Leisure Services.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, please.
Right, it was acknowledged when we set the target that there would need to be an uplift in the revenue budget for tree maintenance, and that's been approved. So there will be a budget uplift to support the planting of the additional trees. So the council has provided a capital budget of £3 million over 4 years to plant the 50,000 trees, which includes the employment of a tree planting officer. But on top of that, there is an ongoing revenue contribution to support the additional trees. There is an overall budget target of 5 million across the 4 years to support the increase in tree canopy. And we're already a good way towards closing the gap from 3 to 5 million with a number of funding streams, not least the Mayor of London's Street Tree Programme, which is Ealing Council's been a benefiter of that fund for a good many years now. So I think we have probably in the region of about 3.8 million banked towards the 5 million target for the 4 years, plus the revenue uplift as well. However, I will say that the costs of maintaining trees have gone up manyfold over the last 2 years for a variety of reasons. So there is always a stretch in terms of actually being able to maintain all of our tree estate, and is proving some challenges. And Dale is actually reviewing schedules now to see how we can stretch that budget to support the ongoing maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So you want to come back on that?
No.
Okay,
but can I make?
All right. We just come back briefly on that. Thanks.
No, I just want to make one little comment that Kate missed out on when she didn't come to Grove Farm, and they were thinking of building right, when you say they don't live in this space, right to the bank of that creek. And it was down an embankment right to the creek, and that creek runs into the River Brent. And they were planning, I mean, that's what they're horrified of, that there is going to be no space, and all those buildings are going to overshadow the trees on the other side of the bank. So you would have been horrified. Just my little comment.
Right. Oh, thank you. I've got quite a few questions myself, and so I might as well maybe try and break those into to break that down. So one thing I just maybe just like to bring in maybe some others of our panel, please. Because one thing we did do when we planted the trees is that we were using ties, as has been mentioned, ties in order to hold the trees together. Now, of course, trees, they grow. Now, I suppose someone has to go around and remove the ties as we go around. I mean, what's the system in place in order to make sure that you're accounting for all the different trees and actually remembering all the trees that need to be there? I mean, that comes into a big kind of maintenance argument, especially with there's so many everywhere. So, how do we do that? Thank you.
So I'm trying to remember how long ago it was. It's probably about 8 years ago, we changed the tree ties, or the type of tie we use. We used to have a single tie on a single stake for quite a long time, and then we went to 2 ties. But what we do now is we have 2 stakes with a loop. Now the loop goes from the stake round the tree and then on the opposite side. So even if we don't go to see that tree for 3 years, the worst case scenario is usually that the stakes have broken off because they've rotted and the tree is holding up the stakes. And the loop is so big that it's not going to trouble the tree for probably 10 years. So in terms of tree establishment, that's been a massive improvement, because, yeah, there was quite a long time when all councils really were using single stakes and either 1 or 2 ties, and they were plastic, rigid on a buckle, and they were just growing around them and just strangling them essentially. So we've moved forward in that respect.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yes, please. So Susanna Littlewood from Trees for Cities. Thank you.
In terms of Trees for Cities, tree ties, we've started using Hessian ties, which will biodegrade naturally as well. And we also use the same loop method. And Trees for Cities maintain the standard trees that have the tree ties for 3 years after planting. And generally, by the end of that 3 years, we're able to remove the tree ties because they're established well enough. So there's a record of all the trees, and someone goes and checks all of them, and most of the time removes the ties at that point.
Thank you. So I'll move on to maybe other questions. We've already mentioned the London plane trees. I mean, I know they're popular all over the world. There's just one point that I've heard is that they can be quite bad for hay fever. Now, I don't know if that's true on your expert knowledge, if that's true, and how that really influenced our decision when it comes to planting trees, considering the fact that we're at a position now where about 49% of the people in this country now suffer from hay fever symptoms. I mean, I'm someone who does as well, so it is something something I think about. So how do we maybe take these matters into account when choosing trees? Thank you.
That's a really good question. So London plane, I don't think it's hay fever. So there's London planes, I don't say it's unique, but it's certainly the biggest culprit in that it has there's very fine hairs on the underside of the leaf, and I think it's in hot weather it tends to drop these, or if it's very windy they get disturbed, and the fine hairs tickle the back of your throat. And when I used to work on trees in the summer months, it was almost unbearable. It would make you kind of cough and splutter. And so with London plane, it's probably the hairs and not a hay fever issue. I think birch is one of the biggest culprits for hay fever. But I don't know whether we can stop planting birch trees.
Not just on the account of someone like myself, I suppose. You just to think about the wider picture. Right, thank you. I suppose just I mean, another kind of larger point is that we are aiming to plant a lot of trees. We're thinking in terms of getting that tree canopy cover. Now, because it's one thing that someone has been maybe putting a bit of analysis into this and thinking in terms of, well, we look at maybe planting 1 million trees, have these ideas of planting 1 million trees, when actually what we really need is 1 trillion leaves. So it's actually the leaves that really matter, because that's what's providing the canopy cover. That's what's actually absorbing the carbon and creating those overall benefits as well. Now, if we're building, no, sorry, if we're planting lots of trees, then we end up having them quite close together. Now that might actually inhibit the branches from reaching out and actually creating enough leaves to give us what we actually want from the end benefit. We did see actually at the Regrow farm there was a tree, and we had to look at what made it so special, and it was the fact that it was growing before the others, so it was actually the branches were moving in a completely different way. So that's, I mean, is it really helpful for us to be having lots of trees, or do we need to just look at where we're planting them and actually giving them the chance to grow? That's most important. Thank you.
So it's a bit of both, really. So if we go back to the slides I showed you earlier, we plant whips, so very young trees. They're planted fairly densely together, and that's so they kind of support each other as they grow. So when they're younger, they'll form a canopy probably within maybe 3 to 5 years. And then as they grow to 15, 20 years, you'll need to thin them. So you then remove some of them, and you basically select the best ones, or the species that you want to as your climax canopy. The other trees, so the park trees, the standards, and that we would plant them with enough space. So they will be the trees that don't compete with other trees. So they will have that open canopy that you probably saw in that particular tree. And street trees, again, are also, I mean, they're planted with, in most cases, no other structures around them and no other trees to compete with.
Yeah, thank you. There's also another point which I could bring in, Simeon Linstead from Trees for Streets, in the answer for this question as well, because we're talking about maintaining trees, as that's already come up this evening about what's involved in maintaining trees, and that is a lot of effort. We're talking about watering trees as well, which is not something I really thought about before, because you just assume the rain's looking after that, but maybe we do need to water trees as well. So there's a question I've also been fed through from that co-opted member, when it comes to the maintenance, so we're getting volunteers in. How are we finding volunteers? How are we identifying volunteers? And also, as importantly, how are we supporting them to do the work they do? So maybe I could find out, maybe from Downwater, about how we're finding those volunteers in order to help with look after our trees. But then also maybe from Trees for Streets could put some input as well into the kind of support that they need in order to continue the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Okay, so if I go first, I mean, we have contractors and contract arrangements with watering and aftercare. And really what we need from volunteers or from our tree wardens in the future is kind of extra care. So they, particularly in the summer we just had, the guys couldn't water quick enough. There were teams out 6 days a week. In fact, I think they were even doing 7 days a week, some of them. And it was just so hot and dry, it was drying up straight away. So certainly where we can get residents on board, anyone who wants to adopt trees or adopt all the trees in the street and go out and water them, that was great. That's kind of going to be our message this summer through the tree wardens. And I know Simeon has things kind of set up in the Trees for Streets program, so I'll pass over to him now.
Okay, so you're specifically asking about how we support people who have sponsored trees in terms of them actually going on and helping the tree to establish through watering.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so what we do with the scheme, you have in the Ealing examples, not every council does it, but in the Ealing example, residents are given the option as to whether they sponsor the tree and water it, or sponsor a tree and don't water it, because not everyone can water a tree they've sponsored. They might not be physically able to. The tree might be might not be in the sort of proximity of where they live to make it practical, that in fact we could even sort of depend upon them doing that. So our sort of online fundraising platform, we find out where they live and where the tree is, and obviously if they're in proximity to the tree, then they're given the option that they can make a pledge to water the tree. They'll set two different levels of sponsorship or donation that the resident makes. So if the resident wants to sponsor the tree and water it, it's £170, which is really very, very good. And if the resident wants the council to do the watering, then it's £275. So they're financially incentivized to water the tree if they can. And then what we do is we send them a weekly reminder throughout the watering season, and we follow the Arboricultural Association's recommendations in terms of the amount of water that we ask them to put on the tree. We have had, although this is we've really only been running in Ealing for a matter of weeks, where we've worked. So, for example, I was chatting with a tree officer in Croydon, so who's very well respected in the sort of London tree officer scene, and he was saying that he would actually much rather have the residents doing the watering than the contractors, and the quality of what they do is very good. Because people are very invested in their tree, so that you're not everyone will be great at it, but on the whole, he's seeing some very good results from that. And I certainly, anecdotally, when we go out, we go out and we put labels on the trees to encourage more sponsorship. And I'm quite often going out and in meeting people actually watering the tree, or I'm going out and seeing pits that are wet, or sometimes we see pits that have been planted up with little flowering sort of plants, which is quite nice as well. Sometimes that can conflict with the tree, but if they're sort of quite small ones, then that's okay. So that's what we do. One other thing that we're actively looking at is offering councils on top of the sponsorship scheme is a sort of a way of sort of engaging residents to water the tree. So what we're currently sort of developing is this a kind of a scheme where if they say a QR code on the tree and come and water me, that someone can actually sign up online to water that tree, maybe co-opt a neighbour or so to do it, and they would then get sort of watering reminders sent to them and be sort of part of it. So we're looking at that. That's something that our partner councils can or don't. It's just there if they want to use it. Some have their own schemes, and we're not trying to take over from something that's existing. It's just that it's there if they feel it's of use.
Right, so thank you. So in terms of the support from the council, is it a case of maybe you might like it if we did a bit more to publicise that what you're doing in order to attract people to come along? Is there other support that you might need from the council? Thank you.
Yeah. The schemes that we run, they're very much, it's a partnership. So we're as a charity, part of the Trees for Cities charity, we're working to try to get more trees planted and more engagement. And the marketing communication work that goes on is really we do obviously do a lot of engagement. We talk with a lot of residents, but we do need the councils to be feeding out about the scheme in a regular basis within their comms. It needs to have a presence on the website. So at the moment, unfortunately, the comms, we have not had the level of support we need from the comms team at Ealing. We're not actually on the site. So at the moment, when you click on the site and you go to, you can't find us. So we need that to be addressed. We need regular comms, and we need to be featured on the website like we are with every other council we work with.
Right, lovely, thank you. I think on that point, I've got Councillor Conti who'd like to ask something, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just sort of following on from that, really. I was just wondering, because it sounds like a really great scheme, but when you're just talking about the cost of sponsoring a tree, it just makes me think that it would I guess it's more likely to benefit areas where you have more affluent population. So just looking at the map of Ealing, a lot of probably the more deprived wards are the ones with the lowest canopy cover. And I guess it's how you get those engaged, because a lot of people won't have 170 or 275 pounds to necessarily, especially at this time, to put forward for a tree. It's probably not something necessarily on their radar. And because I may be wrong, but I guess a lot of people, when they do this, probably want their tree on their street. So do you really get, I guess, do you get an equitable spread of sort of trees, and do you end up just benefiting probably some of the wards that already have a very good or high level of canopy cover? And I guess what steps maybe could be done to try and help, in areas where there's, I guess there's less disposable income to do this sort of thing. Can multiple people, if you want to put a tree, I don't know, for example, just back to Southall Green, it's got the lowest, could multiple people can you say, well, it's going to cost £175 and get lots of people in the street to donate a small amount? I don't know, or are these single donations towards the trees?
Okay, so there's a couple of sort of ways of responding to that. Firstly, yes. So on the platform, we have a journey that you if you're a resident, you can sponsor an individual tree. You ask where you want it to go, and you sponsor it. What we found in that regard is that we get people doing that, but we also get people who club together to do that, and we quite like them doing that. It's about sort of people I suppose sort of self-organizing. Part of the scheme, and part of the reason why I do the scheme, is because it's about enabling and empowerment. And when you've got someone who has been able to make something happen in the public domain, which is really difficult. I mean, I suppose all of you who work as members, you probably before that you've been frustrated that things are very difficult in the sort of civic world, and you've made it your life's work to kind of figure out how it works and work your way around it. So we through the scheme have created this sort of simple route, a simple pathway to make something very powerful, very simple happen, and hopefully it opens the front door to doing more things. So we certainly do see people clubbing together. I mean, I was chatting to one woman the other day who'd gone up her street and just asked for 10, 20 quids off people, and they were getting a couple of trees sorted out, and it was for that street. And I think she was sort of doing that at her Jubilee party, because we were seeing people self-organizing. We then built a crowdfunding platform as part of the platform, and we now are actively encouraging people to come and crowdfund for multiple trees. We were sort of beta testing it last year. So we did in Croydon was the first scheme that came on board, and there was quite a sort of rundown retail street in the sort of centre of Croydon, which the residents there came together and collectively raised £13,500. It's quite more expensive planting because of the nature of the planting that was going on. That was outside shops and quite large pits, but that was raised by quite a large group. There's about 180 people who contributed to that. So we certainly see that because of what we've seen and how we developed the platform, we're widening out I suppose the people, the breadth of people who can use it, regardless of how wealthy they are. With the crowdfunders, I was chatting to someone who'd done one in South Tottenham, and she was saying, the woman there who actually worked at Islington Council, this woman, which was the comms officer at Islington Council, was actually saying it was really wonderful seeing someone had put in £3.50, and she goes, that's probably more as a proportion of what they had than some of the people who were putting in 50 quid. And she goes, but it was the opportunity for that person to feel like they've made a contribution, because I mean, maybe that street in Haringey, 3-4 years time, trees would have gone in, but that group of residents who've sponsored 18 trees to go in their street, that connection, that empowerment that they've been given through a scheme is incredibly powerful. So that's one other thing I'd say. And the other thing is, because we're creating quite a bit of momentum with the scheme, we certainly for the last 2 years we've been operating it, we've been getting grant money in as well. So each year first year we were putting money into every council we had, and this year we were approached by Mayor of London's team, and this is one of the reasons why Ealing got involved at the point that it did, was that they had access to money from the Environment Department at the GLA for funding towards 110 trees. Now, whenever we put in grant funding, or wherever there is money coming in from local businesses, and we're getting a growing amount of interest from local businesses as well, we try to, as much as possible, and that's pretty much all the time, make sure that money goes into streets that are in areas of high deprivation, low canopy. The mayor's money has got 3 requirements on it. It's the high deprivation, low canopy streets with state schools on them, and also for shade planting around playgrounds, because we know we want people to use that public amenity, but we know that and particularly on lower incomes, those amenities are incredibly important, but a lot of playgrounds just lack shade, so we want people to be in them for longer, safely. So we're working on those. Are all the different things that we're doing, and this is very much part of the portfolio of work that Trees for Cities has, and that their larger portfolio of work is focused almost entirely on sort of areas of lower affluency in its sort of focus.
Thank you. I think I've asked Councillor Conza, have you got a question as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was can you hear me? I was at Grow Farm. I was at Grow Farm on Sunday, and one thing that struck me, I don't think his name might have been John, was the fact that trees, when they're planted, they take many, many years to grow and thrive, generations. So what investment is there to educate our children to look after the trees when we elders have long gone? You know, this is so important, the sustainability of trees that will be taken on board by our children. How much investment is there around children, us children being educated to look after the trees when the planters have long gone? That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know if Susanna Littlewood wants to answer that one, which is...
Yeah, I can take that. So, I guess from Trees for Cities perspective, that's a big part of what we do with the community engagement. A lot of that is engaging with young people, with children, families. We have our whole schools programme, which is going into schools and doing a variety of projects, getting kids doing hands-on work, planting trees, growing fruit and vegetables. And we have, for each of our tree planting projects, we have community engagement day where anyone can sign up and come along. And we get a lot of families coming down, getting involved with that. But we also, for all of our projects, offer schools workshops to local schools near the planting site. And that's a really great way of getting the kids involved with that as well. And we do surveys with those who come and plant with us to get an idea of the impact and whether they're learning new information about trees, learning new skills to do with tree planting or growing things generally, growing plants, and whether they feel inspired after our events to go and do more of that. And it's generally a resounding yes to all of those things. So yeah, there's definitely quite a lot going on in that area from Trees for Cities' point of view.
That's great, lovely, thank you. And I think that's probably a very fantastic optimistic note to really try and end that part. So what we can do now is maybe as panel members, we can come in with ideas and recommendations that we might want to put forward based on the great discussion that we've had this evening. Thank you. Has anyone got anything they want to put forward or suggest in terms of recommendations? Oh, well, Councillor Taylor, please. Thank you.
Well, to be fair, I think you kind of agreed to it. I know he said he would send me a list, but actually councillors to get a list of different types of trees would be quite useful.
Yeah, we'll
do
that.
More than a recommendation.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, that's certainly. Maybe we need to be learning a bit more about that ourselves. Yeah, and just getting. Actually, Susanna Littlewood, please.
One of my colleagues at Trees for Cities has a very informative Instagram account called Tree ID Club. If you want to learn more about trees and you have an Instagram account, you can search for Tree ID Club.
So maybe
I'm sure the future Mayor of Ealing will be interested.
Excellent. Yes, and I think I've seen one of the apps where you can go for a walk and it'll tell you which trees are actually next to you as you go along. So that's good. So it's something we can think about. I mean, I did mention also Councillor Zesamos has brought that in as well, and Councillor Crawford looking at that in terms of the planning side, that maybe. Okay, I don't know if we can necessarily recommend that we get an ecology officer because that's money and that we might not necessarily have within the budget. But in terms of what can we do to improve even just the council's understanding of the impact of building upon our trees and upon our green areas. So maybe we need a bit more education around that, especially at planning committee. Maybe that's something that we could include. What I won't be able to do is actually write out all our recommendations here as word for word, but it's certainly something I can do as we did the last meeting, is that if we get the ideas, then maybe I'll try and put together some kind of proper paragraph to explain what we want to do, and then we can confer, maybe myself and the vice chair, and we can discuss what we can put forward. But maybe that's something that if people are really in agreement, if that's something we could put down to look into. I don't know if there's any other points that we want to make on. Oh, Councillor Conti, please.
I guess really alludes to the vast number of trees that has to be planted to get to that 35% increase. And obviously the council can do so much, but I guess what Dale was saying about obviously getting residents, in their private gardens, etc. And I guess a recommendation about how, so obviously one of the things is how many residents really know about this ambition, and how we then go about helping, how do they feel empowered to help deliver that? And obviously there's schemes like Trees for Streets, etc. But it's about how you engage residents in that and bring them along that journey. I don't know how you would do that. It's more than just an article in Ealing Today, around Ealing, but it's an ongoing thing. I know there was a festival about trees last year, but how do we build on that work? I guess maybe a recommendation around that.
Yes, certainly. That'd be just excellent if we can look into that and just say that if officers can just see what we are doing in terms of that outreach and just see what we can further on that from there. Yeah, okay, all right. Oh, okay. So I've got Councillor Hamidi. I know she's been unwell recently, but she's got to the stage where she's actually lost her voice, unfortunately. So we do wish her well. But in the meantime, she would just like to get more information about the sponsoring scheme that we can promote with residents would be helpful. So maybe it's something that we need to recommend that councillors need to be doing that outreach as well and speaking to residents, because I'm sure when we knock on doors or we talk to residents, they have concerns about trees. I know that when it comes to trees, I've had a lot of concerns from residents as well and questions. So yes, we do actually need to know a bit more about that as well. So that'd be something we could bring into the recommendation. So thank you, Councillor Meady, and I wish you well soon. Thank you. Councillor Mohan, please.
In terms of recommendations, I think it's relevant to this panel. By the time we have planted 50,000 more trees, there will be more burden on street cleaning, leaves collection. Already people are kind of complaining that there is delay in collection of trees, leaves. So I think we need to keep this in mind, that the street cleaning services may need more resources to deal with that.
I could just add.
Yes, thank you.
I'll add another one to that as well, because they're always on my back, and that's highways maintenance, route trips, so tree routes, invariably damage the pavement and require repair. So with more trees, there will be more repairs to make to the pavement.
I think that's quite a comprehensive list, so I'll see what I can put together from that. And Councillor Crawford, thanks.
Yeah, if you could add the growing the older population, can't get the words right, who are very concerned about the leaves, especially after it's rained, that they feel very, it's very dangerous. So you can add the older population, which is growing, and so and it's pretty hazardous.
Yes, so that's part of the kind of planning for making sure that we can deal with that maintenance, deal with the cleaning that comes from there. Yes, yes. So okay. Oh, so sorry, Councillor Mohan, did you
want to clarify? I want to make some comments about the Grow farm. Will there be another opportunity, or do I make them? Is that relevant to today's panel, or
the Grow? Sorry,
our visit to the Grow farm.
Oh, Grow farm. Oh, yes, please. Yes, that's what I was hoping that people might say something apart from just myself. Yes, please.
So it's okay to make. Yeah, it's just one or two observations or comments, suggestions. I think the farm can do with more signage. There, like no fly tipping, no littering, and also in terms of directions, there are no signs at the moment. And secondly, I noticed that there are no waste bins, rubbish collection bins. The other one, which is just for my information, that I'm wondering why the Grow farm has been removed from the MOL list.
We don't have anyone here to answer that question. I think there is an answer,
I
but I think if I start going into this, I think we may be here for a couple of hours. So so what I might do is maybe just
raise the committee's concerns about that.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Okay. Clarification.
Yes. I haven't got time to go through all that right now. But yes.
That's right. That's right. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Okay, thank you. So in that case, we've got plenty there for myself and Councillor Zizos to work with, and so from there on, I suppose we can move on the agenda. Is what we do need to look at. Is for the next our next meeting, which we'll be looking at recycling. So maybe there's a couple of points already on there. So if anyone has got anything more they want to raise, that they'd like us to look at when it comes to recycling and any. Oh, sorry,
it's about soft plastics. I picked this up. I asked Earl Mackenzie about this because someone who lives on Brunswick Road actually raised it with me. The council don't collect soft plastics, and a lot of supermarkets do in those containers, but there's clearly a lot of plastic waste. Most people don't collect stuff and then take it to the supermarket, so it ends up going to landfill. And I did raise this with Earl, and he goes, well, they'll look into it and speak to our current not supplier, contractor who deals with the waste. But I think there's a big glaring amount of potentially recyclable material that we are sending to landfill. I just wonder whether that's something about how soft plastics could be dealt with better in Ealing, could come into when I can see he's coming to he's on the list of people coming. So I don't know whether getting something on soft plastic, he said he would look into it, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But maybe that'd be a perfect opportunity to ask about soft plastic.
Yes, I think so. We certainly need to know a little bit more about what we can recycle and how we can recycle it. So that's something that's very useful. I do a lot of work at where I actually do work on that side, and I never managed to get a complete list of everything that can be recycled. So maybe we do need a bit more education on that. Certainly, yes, Councillor Zizos.
I want to know what they're going to do about getting people in flats to recycle and not have to use those stupid plastic bags that Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox just love. And they just tear them apart because people don't clean the stuff that they put in there properly, and they can smell it, and they just tear them apart, and they're just like strewn everywhere. Yes.
So that'd be good. We can find out a bit more about that and maybe get an update on what's going on in terms of getting food recycling into our flats as well and improving our overall facilities. So that's one thing we could do. Councillor Taylor, please.
Yeah, I was going to mention flats as well, but in addition to that, it's my bugbear really in one sense in relation to housing tenure, because certain parts of the borough have a high levels of private renting. It was just an idea. Obviously, the team won't necessarily know which properties are which, but if there was any kind of correlation between levels of recycling and levels of tenure patterns, if you like, because obviously, for example, like East Acton, lots of flats, high levels of private renting. How does that compare, to bits of central Ealing, for example? Just to get an idea of where we are. I know the administration's keen to, it's got plans in place to improve flats in, recycling in flats with different bins, I think.
Yes, that'd be really helpful as well. Looking at it just expands that issue, looking a bit further into that. I mean, one thing I might like to add is actually how we make it easier for people to recycle, because it's a case of actually getting to the recycling centres and how you actually go about even recycling things at home. So how we can go about making improvements to how much people can recycle to improve our recycling rates. So I think that's really what we ultimately want to move towards. So that's something we can do. Yes. Okay. I'm just seeing if there's any further points. Okay, I don't know if Councillor Taylor was trying to come back in there or...
Sorry, yeah, I think I might make a preemptive recommendation. Card people, Christmas card people, stop putting glitter on the cover of their Christmas cards, because apparently you've got to take it off and recycle them.
Well, hopefully people who are listening in will take that on board, but I'm not sure if the council can ban that universally. So Councillor Compton, please.
So just one other thing on recycling. It's about, because I was reading something a while ago about how even though people put stuff in the recycle bin and think they're doing a really great job, and then a lot of it gets sorted and it can't be recycled, it contaminates the rest of the waste, and a percentage of it ends up going to landfill anyway, or having to be incinerated, etc. So it'd be interesting to see actually of what go in Ealing, of what we put in our big blue bin, how much of it actually then gets recycled, how much of it's contaminated, and if so, clearly it's a thing about education, isn't it? So how can residents be better informed to make sure that's not happening? It may not be a problem, but if it'd be good to know if it is.
Goodness me, I think we'll have plenty for Earl and the other officers to work with there. And no, Councillor Crawford, just to finish off.
Maybe we could touch also on enforcement with the recycling bins when they're abused, they're left out, and they're just full of, rubbish, junk, and they're not using them for the purpose. So I'd be interested in knowing what enforcement to plan to do. We have to have an enforcement officer. Oh, that'd be great.
Oh, yes, Councillor Sissells, please.
In Australia, they have a thing where once every quarter, once every 6 months, the council will come and pick up any crap that you put out, right? It'd be really nice if we could do that. So instead of dumping their mattresses willy-nilly everywhere, people just like hold on to them for 3 months or 4 months, whatever it is, and put them out all together. Or someone was saying that in Brent, apparently they put a skip at the end of the road and say you can put whatever you want in, or something like that, instead of having people just fly tip everywhere. I know that people in Hanger Hill fly tip that don't live in Ealing, they just drive along the A40 and dump stuff. And I'm sure in Acton as well. But is there a way of, is there something we can do
yes,
well, I'd just like to say I've had residents ask me that, and no, because they will just dump everything. It's unfair. But we have a brilliant scheme of 40 quid for about 8 items. But what we could do is to make that, to try and encourage streets to part, because someone might just have 2 or 3 things. They go microwave, they go something, and they want to get rid of it. But there could be a way where streets, a lot of streets have apps, and
yes,
I think there's a way where we could actually get more people to take up this scheme jointly.
We're in danger of actually having the meeting now, and putting together all recommendations now. So we've got plenty of
okay, but
I think that's brilliant. Yes, so we'll hold on to some thoughts, and
I'll tell you,
East Acton, so please take a note, and so you remember. Okay, lovely. That's great. So I think, yes, I think we're probably, oh goodness me, I'm full of enthusiasm and I look forward to welcoming you all at our next meeting on the 11th of May. So we've got that, and I really thank you so much to our panel that have been here today, and thank you for your time.